Hey, Silas here. Happy New Year to all of you out there. This is the first entry in the Hands Up Don't Hit series of 2020. And the Hands Up Don't Hit series is one focusing on peaceful parenting. I think peaceful parenting is the key to world peace and just a better world for everyone out there, everyone involved in it. And I think many of the world's problems can be tracked down to adverse childhoods. If we treat the kids better, we're going to have better adults and we're going to have better communities, better cultures, and better results. So, with this series, I talk about different issues, I read different articles, talk about different things, bring different information, have a resource for sharing this and spreading this message. And today I'm going to be reading an article from SoraNews about peaceful parenting and some laws that are going around in Japan. Hope you guys enjoy. Hey, so now we're going to get into reading the article now. This is from SoraNews 24, and it's titled Survey Reveals 70% of Japanese Adults Believe Corporal Punishment is Necessary. There will be links below to the article if you want to check it out yourself. This article was posted by Krista Rogers on December 30th of 2019. Now getting into the reading. In light of an upcoming law, this survey sought adults' attitudes towards broad topics related to disciplining children and child abuse. In 2019, the number of births in Japan numbered fewer than 870,000, a staggering new low amidst decades of decline. The country's declining birth rate continued to be a widely discussed societal issue this past year, along with a series of highly visible child abuse incidents. In order to combat the latter, the amended Child Abuse Prevention Act, originally proposed to the National Diet by the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare back in March, will prohibit corporal punishment when it takes effect this coming April. This month, the ministry also released guidelines in preparation of the impending legislation which defines types of corporal punishment and strategies to combat child abuse. In light of these new developments, Japanese travel provider Airtrip conducted an internet survey in mid-December on topics related to the use of corporal punishment when disciplining children as well as child abuse to gauge the general public's reactions. There were 796 male and female respondents to the survey ranging from age in their 20s to their 70s. Of these individuals, 456 have children of their own, while 340 do not have children. Let's take a look at 6 of the survey questions in greater detail and their corresponding results. Survey questions. Question 1. For those with children, have you ever struck your child and or been about to strike your child? The survey results revealed that of the 456 respondents with children, 49.8% have struck a child before and 29.1% have been about to strike a child. Question 2. Do you believe that corporal punishment is necessary when disciplining children? For a little context, we've seen examples of corporal punishment in Japan this year go viral online and be hotly debated, including this teacher punching a student and a mother smacking her child. The majority of the survey takers replied that the use of corporal punishment was at least occasionally necessary when disciplining children. Among those with their own children, 70.6% said it was necessary on a daily basis or occasionally, while 67.4% of those without their own children said the same. Question 3. The other day, the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare released guidelines on corporal punishment. What do you think of them creating these guidelines? Among all survey respondents, 50.8% had no opinion to the guidelines, 35.8% approved of them, and 13.4% opposed them. Those who approved of the guidelines provided reasons such as, adults these days are lacking in common sense, so it's necessary to spell things out for them. And the definition of corporal punishment changes with the times, so it's best to be clear. Those who opposed the guidelines provided reasons such as, every household has a different style of parenting, so it's impossible to standardize guidelines in one manual. And even if guidelines are in place, those who abuse children will continue to do it. Question 4. Within the corporal punishment guidelines released the other day by the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, out of the concrete examples given as corporal punishment, please choose the ones that you consider to be corporal punishment. Quick note. This particular question seems to comprise a looser definition of corporal punishment, including punishments that are not directly physical but may encompass emotional abuse as well. Both of these groups, with and without children, selected saying, "I wish you were never born," as a joke, as the most agreed upon example of abuse. 79.7% with children and 80% without children. The other examples in decreasing order of general consensus included not giving them dinner for not doing their homework, criticizing or ignoring only one sibling, hitting them because they hit a friend, slapping their cheek because they wouldn't listen after you warned them, and making them sit siesta style for a long time because they pulled a prank. The example with the least amount of general consensus was spanking them for stealing somebody else's things, which was 38.4% with children and 40.3% without children. A very small number of the respondents also did not classify any of the examples as corporal punishment. Question 5. What do you think about the punishments for child abuse by parents in present-day Japan? Current law stipulates that offenders will serve under a year of penal servitude or pay under 1 million yen, which is about US dollars 9,100 in fines. Those parents who abuse results in the death of a child will serve between 3 to 20 years. Presently, neither life imprisonment nor the death penalty are stipulated by law. Out of the survey respondents, 66% thought these penalties are too lax. 22.7% did not know, 7.8% thought they were appropriate, and 3.5% thought they are too strict. Question 6. What needs to be done to stop child abuse by parents? 58.8% of all survey takers agreed that an expansion of parent consultation centers for parents was the most necessary countermeasure for change. The only three other responses that scored over 50% in general consensus included an expansion of temporary child protection shelters, proactive police intervention, and early intervention by child consultation centers. The lowest ranking responses besides other, at 21.6%, was a change in the duty and acquisition of paternity leave, i.e. the rethinking of traditional gender roles in Japan, which experts recently voiced as a prerequisite for raising the country's declining birth rate. All in all, it seems like Japanese parents still have yet to completely agree on what actually constitutes corporal punishment when disciplining their children. Perhaps an awareness campaign surrounding the government's recently released guidelines will go a long way towards building a general consensus before the new law goes into effect early next year. And that's it for the article. Now, some of my comments, kind of just going back into this whole thing to kind of check it out. As usual with articles like this, there's the comment section. I like checking it out to see what people are saying. And here, someone says, Chris says, you may want to look at the numbers. It should be under 870,000 births, not 87,000. So I guess they kind of had it wrong there. So it's still low, but not quite so horrifyingly. And I think people are freaking out too much about the dropping birth rates in certain cultures. Most of the cultures that have the dropping birth rates, sure, they have certain things. I think it has a lot to do with the economy, with the fiat currency, with the fake kind of currency. But let me kind of give you some background. Most of them weren't involved in the world wars. And I think after the world wars, with all those people dying, people came back. There was a lot of celebration. There was a lot of need and want to have a lot of kids. Then the birth rate spiked up. And then you also have the drop in actual, in people dying from during childbirth. People had higher survivability into adulthood, so people started having less kids. People started moving to cities. There wasn't that strong of an idea that we have to have 10, 20 kids in order to have 10 of them or 7 of them or 9 of them actually live to actual adulthood. The idea of investing in many kids, the idea of investing in a few kids kind of became more of a thing that people would do. I think if you look back to prehistorical times when people were actually having kids, you'll notice the numbers aren't really that high. I think this idea that we have to have a certain replacement rate, that's a figure that's kind of been thought of more recently, and then we're getting these fears and things towards that. And I think in general, the Japanese culture also has a very zombie economy, and I think there might be some background identity of people kind of realizing, like, okay, are we really in a situation where we are economically comfortable enough to actually have this number of kids? And there's something to do with Japan also doesn't have that much immigration. And some people with more ethno-nationalists look at Japan and they look what Japan is doing. Like, okay, if Japan had more immigrants coming in and having kids in that sense, would it dilute the Japanese stock, the Nipponese race or whatever? So there's all these things to go with it, but that's for a different video. I just wanted to kind of touch on that. The next comment here says, Sounds like the survey and or this news article had an agenda. It seems to me that there are those who believe that any discipline of a child that involves any form of physical action believe this to be abuse. It's like, no, this isn't special pleading. I think this Jason person is probably somebody who's excusing the abuse that he is actually doing on his children or has experienced from his parents, because it's not just any form of physical action. Like, if I see my kid walking into the street, if I see a child walking into the street and I grab them to pull them back from that danger, that is a physical action. I'm not going to consider that abuse. You're trying to equivocate this thing. You're trying to make a false comparison here. It's not just physical action, it is aggression. If something can be defined as aggression, then yes, you are abusing that child. You are abusing that individual. I think one thing I'd like to kind of think when you're talking about these things, Mr. Jason over here, if you get into a situation where if you did that same action to a grown man your size, what would that grown man say about what you did? If you did that to your wife, to your girlfriend, what would society say you've done in that situation? If you can look at that situation and say, oh no, in that situation, it's not abuse. It's just okay. It's just me using some physical action to get what I want from this person. If you still think that's okay, and he might, I don't know. But I think I have an agenda. I think child abuse is a negative thing. This hands up, don't hit series is because of talking about things like this. Because you get into situations where you have someone like Jason who's either abusing his children in some way, using aggression, or has been a victim of being aggressed at while he was a child, and he's trying to equivocate me. Because I'm not saying, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I was like you. I don't know. I don't know this guy's life, but I know I did this for a while. I was like, I mean, like sometimes you're supposed to hit them. And with that, let's get into the article and kind of see some points of things that I thought were interesting that are worth discussing in greater length. Okay, the answer in question one here, 49.8% have struck a child before and 29.1% have been about to strike a child. Now, of course, this is of the ones who have actually had children. And 49.8%, it's, you're saying it's half, but there's many societies, many cultures where it's like 90%. I think they did a test in Britain. There was some kind of test that I saw someone discuss in a video some years back, and it was something like 81%. If you look at African American societies, African American culture, I think you'd look at about 90%. If you look at sub-Saharan African culture, like I'm here in Kenya right now, I think, yeah, it would also be 90%. I've actually hit the child, and it's not just I've hit the child, but I like have other people who've hit my kids, and it's okay. Like it gets to that point where it might be 49.8% where like I've hit my kid multiple times with sticks, with all these weapons and things like this, and I'm also okay with other people hitting my kids. And I think if you just look at this is an easy thing. If you want to look at results of how good people in different demographics do in different groups and cultures, I seriously think you look at their child abuse, you look at their adverse childhood experiences, and that will correlate strongly to their results and successes as an adult. This is something I highly believe, and I think the fact it's 49.8% is part of why Japan scores better in certain things than other cultures and other people, Japanese people in general. Okay, question number two now. Now, this was a question about corporal punishment being necessary when disciplining a child. And you see here that it says among those with their own children, 70.6% said it was necessary on a daily basis or occasionally, while 67.4% of those without children said the same. Now, you have that 70.6% figure, but then that goes with the 49.8% that they have struck a child before. So if 70.6% think it's necessary on a daily basis, and those same people asked, only 49.8% said they have struck, then there's probably some people who might be lying. It number could be higher. So that's unfortunate for the Japanese children out there. And I checked out these two questions that they said were issues that came up in the Japanese public. The first one with the Japanese teacher. This is a 15-year-old boy. Apparently he was in some row with a teacher about having an earring in and all these other things, and they're in the hallway talking back and forth. And then the teacher punched him and then dragged him because he was talking smack. I guess the language was respectful enough. And they have this kind of culture thing there. So different people are talking about different ways. The school should keep the teacher and expel the student. So there's people going back and forth with this thing. It wasn't right to hit him, but the words the student was saying were just as violent. The student isn't a victim here. No, words are not violence in that sense. You see, and this is the thing. Somebody will look at this in this situation and say, okay, Words are violent. The student's words are violent against the teacher. But then you look back at people like that Jason person I was talking about before, like in the comment, he will talk about how, oh, it's any physical force is supposed to be abuse. If somebody has those same mentalities when they say words, and that is why, like we talked about later, sorry, like it was later in this article, when they're talking about just things you say to a kid can also be abuse. And that's the thing. This article was talking about how there is also mental abuse. It's mental and emotional abuse that doesn't have the physical, it's not just corporal punishment. Now, this article was focusing on corporal punishment, it was there in the start, but even Jason completely ignored that. This person here, would they ignore the words that the teacher was saying to the student, being part of the violence that was being done towards the student, or is it only the student who is being violent to the teacher due to the words? Now, the other situation was kind of similar to what I've talked about before, where it's like, hey, your kid's about to be in danger. What do you do? If you grab the kid back, is that abuse? No, you've used physical action on the kid, but it's not abuse. So in this situation, is dashcam footage that appears to be in 2017. It shows a child on a bicycle suddenly dashing out behind a parked car to in the left-hand side of the road, and the child seems to have come out from a driveway to the home, and then this car kind of stops and brakes, and seconds later, a young woman peers out from behind the car, and when she sees a stopped car on the road, she bows and runs over to the child. She bows to the car, to the person driving, and then runs over to the child and immediately smacks him across the face with force. With force of the blow, sends him falling backwards onto the ground. Now, in this situation, people, of course, on both sides are saying, okay, this is a mother being concerned. But look, in this situation, the car has already stopped. The child is already out of danger. Yes, it could happen again, but you don't have to go hit the kid in this situation. I think there are ways to communicate to that kid. And this is more of a situation in this one. I think it's more the parent is frustrated. The parent is frustrated that, look, this happened. This kid almost died. I don't think that she doesn't care for the kid. She's thinking, I could have lost you in this sense. And then she has that frustration and she takes it out by hitting the kid. That's probably something that she's seen growing up. She thinks that's an effective way. But think about this. If she just went and she broke down and she cried, because she had enough mental know-how to say, okay, I'm going to bow to the person who's doing this, who stopped the car. But let's say it was just a rock or an animal or something else had happened. It was a landslide and that landslide just almost hit the kid and stopped for some reason. Would you still hit the kid? I don't know if she still would. Maybe she still would. Maybe this was just in the countryside somewhere and the kid had run out into somewhere and then there was a ravine and some rock came and stopped and then she'd be like, okay, I don't know. I don't know what goes on in this kind of situation. But when you have this situation, if she went down, she broke down, she cried and she was emotional with the kid and kind of talked to the kid, I think that can still stick in that kid's memory that, wow, my mom was brought to tears. She was really emotional. She was really hurt by this. And I'm not going to do this again. I'm going to try to be more aware next time I go out into the street. There's other ways to do it without having to hit the kid. So in this situation, I think it is a violation of the non-aggression principle. I think going into this situation is corporal punishment because the danger in the thing has gone. There are other ways to actually interact and express that this is a negative situation without having to hit the kid. And I'm glad that these are things that are coming out. And this is what I'm talking about. Part of the reason I'm making these videos, making this content, is because some people really don't know. Some people are not really aware. Some people look at other cultures and like, oh, they don't do that there, or that's not what's done in that place, or that's how it is there. Now you can actually look and see this is what conversations other people are having as well. These are things that are happening in other places. And there might be people who see this video, hear somebody commenting about something, and then they say, oh, maybe I'll do it in a different way, or I can share this with somebody. And yeah, like, share, and subscribe also with this series and this article. And yeah, back to the surveys. Question number 3. Now, this was talking about do people agree with this? And they're talking about the other day. The other day, the Ministry of Health. The other day, it's a weird thing. I don't like the term nowadays, but the other day is used here a couple of times. I don't know if it's a translation issue, but anyway. So they're talking about do people agree with these guidelines? And they're saying, okay, yeah, people are guidelines. Most people seem to agree with them. They said for 50.8% had no opinion in the guidelines, 35.8% approved of them. That means most, the people who actually had an opinion one way or the other, most of them approved of them, and 13.4% opposed. So I think it seems that the Japanese seem to have a lot more general of, I don't know, let me not comment on this. I was going to comment on how they feel towards their government and their state and their thing like that. I know they recently came out from having a monarch, an absolute monarch, a godly being. The Emperor Hirohito, I think, was the last one who was actually considered a god on earth. And they have different cultural aspects. I'm a fan of Japanese culture just from the manga and the anime and things like that. So I think I know some things about this, but let me not talk about that in this situation here. So coming back to this thing, the last comment here, even if the guidelines are in place, those who abuse children will continue to do it. Yes, that's true. But these are the kind of guidelines. Like I said, I'm an anarchist, but in the general sense that with anarchist, I define it, the definition I'm going for when I'm saying that is pretty much just I'm against people who are above laws. I'm not against laws. I'm against the state because the state sets laws and they're not subject to those laws. And the state itself is an institution that has a monopoly of violence over a certain given area, and it gets its mandate and power from having that monopoly of violence over you and everybody else. So they set laws, they don't apply to them. I mean, it doesn't apply to them in general. If the state does something, it's okay, it's the law. But if you do that same thing, you're committing a crime. No, just have a situation where if anyone does this thing, it's a crime, and we agree on that, and I'm okay with that. So the laws, in this sense, I think having a law in place against this is a positive thing because there might be some situations where some people seriously don't know and some people will find out, and there are people out there. And I don't care if the kid is not hit because the parent thinks they'll be punished for hitting the kid versus if the kid is not hit because the parent thinks it's a bad thing to do. Of course, I would prefer the second, the parent doing it because they've thought about it and realized this is a bad thing to do for this kid. But I'm okay with the first when it comes to this situation, when it comes to protecting the kids. So in that situation, yeah, every household has a different parenting style, so it's impossible to standardize guidelines in one manual. Yeah, you don't have to standardize it, but I think I'm okay with us saying, look, if you're going to live in this community, in this culture, don't hit the kid, because you hitting the kid is not just a personal thing. You hit that kid has negative effects. That kid goes out and hits my kid because you've been hitting your kid at home. I don't want to deal with that. We have to live here together. I'm okay with those kind of laws and those kind of situations, or does worse things as growing up because of adverse childhood experiences do have negative results in the person's life. Okay, moving on to the next question. Question 4. This was about the concrete examples of corporal punishment that were given to them, and then people saying, like this one, saying, I wish you were never born, as a joke. That is that's a tough thing. I mean, kids remember these things. These are the kind of things that I think if your parent has said that to you, I don't know. I don't remember. My parents haven't said that to me, but there's ways you can do it. I think that's part of the general thing. Part of that whole situation. People are hating you, you get that thought, like, you brought me into this world, yet you're getting angry. Is it my fault? Is it my problem? To say I wish you were never born, it's such a tough thing. And I think that's one of those kind of things that somebody would hear and internalize it, and it'll just slowly by slowly eat away at them. I don't think it's something that they have in the front of their mind. If you tell a kid this, they'll put it somewhere back there. It'll be in there. It'll just be part of what they filter, everything that goes into their life experience. Right? And I think that's a terrible, terrible thing to do here. And you see here they were talking about things criticizing or ignoring only one sibling. They're talking about not giving them dinner for not doing their homework. And you see two things here, making them sit siesta style. And that's what I'm talking about before, why I think Jason down below has personal issues and he hasn't dealt with his own child abuse. Because even though this article was directed on corporal punishment, they definitely discussed other forms of child abuse. They weren't only talking about hitting them. And yeah, so that's just what I wanted to say about this question and things. Okay, so on to the next question. Question 5. What do you think about the punishments of child abuse by the parents in present-day Japan? And these punishments, okay, $9,100. That's a lot of money. And yeah, like I said, I don't know where the money would go. Would it go to some kind of system and some project that helps kids who have been hit, or does this go to taxes? But I don't know. Like I said, I think it's tough with these laws. You know, some people go back to the whole thing. Oh, without the state, people will just do X, Y, Z. Oh, without God, people will just do X, Y, Z. And I just like, okay, are you not doing the things you don't do because you've come to some personal idea that you think these things are wrong to do? Or do you not do those things because of the punishments that you think? Like, I was kind of recording here right now, and there's somebody mowing the lawn outside, and you can hear him. It's something I can take on post-production some distance. But anyway, I'm kind of thinking, like, would I just go out there if nobody was going to catch him? Like, I'm recording here. Would I just go out there and snipe the guy just because I wanted to record and the person was making noise? Would that be a thing? Am I not doing that because I think that, oh, if I do that, the state or the government, somebody will come and actually arrest me for doing that? Is that why you don't do things? Is that why you're not just an evil git like every day of your life because you think you'll be punished by somebody who is stronger than you? Is that it? And if that's how you are, I don't want to have much to do with you in my life. But They might be people like that. So maybe some of these punishments do need to do that. But I do think they should be some actual results for your actions. And I can understand this. This comes to kind of thing where people are like, this person is responsible for their actions, so they should have some abuse. And that's why I'm coming down to this thing on the child abuse. That's why I talk about these things. Are you holding kids as responsible for their actions that they deserve some kind of punishment? Most of the kind of abuse and things that we talk about with children, if the government, if the state does those things to people, if you do that to other adults in your life, you would consider that to be abusive behavior. But when it's done to kids, it's okay. And I think some of the extent, some of the things people accept from institutions of authority like the state to be okay and excuse comes because they were put through certain things as kids that they now think this is how the world works. Oh, if my parents did this to me, and for sure my parents love me and they're so much closer to me, then it's kind of okay if the state does those same things. And I think if we can get to a situation where we can understand the negative things of the state and then take any positive aspects of governments and actually still have that in our society, then part of that is increasing the amount of people who are peacefully parented, reducing the amount of child abuse, and you have cultures, societies, communities that are doing better. So the last question: what needs to be done to stop child abuse by parents? And then 58.8% of all survey takers agree that the expansion of parental consultation centers for parents was the most necessary countermeasure for change. And this goes back to the thing. I really do think that people don't know. There's a lot of people who don't know. There was a time when I was younger where I literally had not heard of peaceful parenting. It just wasn't a concept. Because you look back in history and life for kids has been so much worse than it is today. So as bad as it is today in some places and for some people, I still understand it was a lot worse before, where these concepts weren't even thought of. But part of the things that also weren't thought of were things like the internet, where you can share this information and talk to people and spread these things around. And yeah, so I think just spreading this message, and as I mentioned before, please like, share, and subscribe. This is one of my favorite series on this channel. As I said, with this year, I am considering pulling this out because I know some of the content I make might get people to not want to listen to these things. Some of the content I make definitely is a situation where it can be demonetized. It's not advertiser friendly and things like this. But this content is very important, and I want other people to actually also donate, sorry, not donate, but also contribute with reading their stories that they have, ideas that they have, ways to kind of spread this peaceful parenting message and things like that. So it might be beneficial to have this kind of pulled out to a separate thing where that can be more a thing that people feel, okay, I'm okay with linking to this because this person's not like talking about this other thing in this other situation that people disagree with. So anyway, so more on that as that comes. It's crossover with these things also. This is some other topics I talk about. It's like rethinking of traditional gender roles in Japan. Here they're talking about the lowest ranking response besides other at 21.6% was a change in the duty and acquisition of paternity leave. And this is part of what I've heard. The first time I heard about that whole drop in the what's it called, in the reproductive rate, in the amount of kids being had, the fertility rate and things like that. Not fertility, because I think the women are still fertile, they're just not having kids. The declining birth rate was during the, listen to MGTOW, the men going their own way kind of environment, talking about the things in Japan, it becoming very gynocentric, a lot of women's rights and things like that being pushed there, with the men being left behind. So here they're talking about getting men back home so they can have paternal leave as well to take care of the kids. And I think men, mothers, fathers, families do better when they're together. I think the more time they spend together is positive. It doesn't, whether it's two women, whether it's two men, whether it's whatever. If a kid can do well with one good mother, they can do well with even better with a good mother and a good father. If they can do well with just a good father, they can do well with a good father and good mother. If they can do well with one good adult, they can do well with two good adults of any sex, whatever gender. The more adults they have, the more people around they have that are good, that care for them, the better it is for that kid's life. So when they're taking steps to get to a situation where you have a more better balance of you being able to be a parent, I think the better it is for everyone involved. So that's it for this video, and that's the first one of the Hands Up Don't Hit in the series. As I talked about, there's going to be a lot more coming in. It's been a bit longer than the other ones, but it's okay. There's a few more articles I already have saved, and if there's any articles that you find interesting and you want to send, you can send it to me, hands up don't hit, or HUDH at carbon33.com. You can contact me there, and as I mentioned, there will be a separate, if I get this project going up and get the separate channel up, I already have a YouTube channel. I haven't uploaded anything on there yet, but I'll let you guys know about that one. And let me know. Did you guys know anything about Japan? Are you living in Japan? Do you have parents? Do you have kids? Do you think the things in this article were actual positive? Do you think sharing this information is good? When did you first find out about peaceful parenting, if you have found out about it? If this is your first time hearing about it, then that's awesome. I'm super glad that it's part of why I'm making this content, and super boosted to hear that. Anyway, so that's it for now. Like, share, and subscribe. Goodbye.